You wake up tomorrow, and let's say the clock says 6:52. You haven't moved yet. Your eyes are barely open, and already, before your first thought finishes forming, your body has spent more energy in the last 4 minutes than it will spend in the next 20. Here's where that energy goes in the first hour you're awake. Almost none of it goes to your muscles, and almost all of it goes to a single chemical surge, and the quiet, expensive work of switching your entire chemistry from night shift to day shift. That's the answer. But knowing where the energy goes tells you nothing about the part that actually matters, because most people spend that first hour surge fighting it, dulling it, delaying it, wasting it on the wrong things, and by the time they feel like they've woken up, the most valuable window of the day has already closed behind them. So let me tell you what's really happening at 6:52, because you have a system running that hour that you were probably never told you had. Between roughly 6:30 and 7:30, depending on when you naturally surface, your adrenal glands release a sharp pulse of cortisol. Not a trickle, a spike. It's called the cortisol awakening response, and it's one of the most reliable rhythms in human physiology. Within 30 to 45 minutes of you opening your eyes, your cortisol climbs by 50 to 60% above the level it was at while you slept. That climb is not stress in the way you've been taught to fear the word. That climb is the ignition. Cortisol at that hour is the hormone that unlocks stored glucose, sharpens your attention, and tells every cell in your body that the fast is over and the day has begun. Now, why would your body burn a large share of its morning energy on a hormone instead of on movement? Because switching states is more expensive than staying in one. Think of a freight train. The single most fuel-hungry moment in a train's entire journey isn't the cruising, it's the first 30 seconds of pulling a stationary load into motion. Your body at dawn is that stationary train. Overnight it dropped your core temperature by about half a degree Celsius, slowed your heart, thinned your circulating glucose, and parked most of your systems. The cortisol awakening response is the locomotive throwing everything it has into that first pull. And that raises the harder question. If the first hour is the pull, what happens to a train that gets its ignition sabotaged? Here's the recognition beat. If you've ever woken up and reached for your phone in the dark, scrolled for 20 minutes, and then felt somehow more tired than when you opened your eyes, you were feeling this exact mechanism go wrong. You weren't lazy. You interrupted an ignition sequence mid-fire. Let me name the system properly, because it has parts, and the parts matter. The command doesn't start in the adrenal glands. It starts in a cluster of about 20,000 neurons, sitting just above where your optic nerves cross, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, your master clock. Every cell in your body keeps its own little clock, run by a set of genes with almost comically plain names. Clock, BMAL1, PER, cry. Left alone, those cellular clocks drift. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is the conductor that keeps the whole orchestra playing the same tempo, and the single thing it uses to set that tempo is light hitting the back of your eye. So the first hour of your energy isn't really governed by how well you slept. It's governed by what your eyes see and when. So what actually decides whether that cortisol surge lands clean or lands scattered? Light timing. Not caffeine, not breakfast, not willpower. There's a specialized cell in your retina discovered only in the early 2000s, the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell, packed with a pigment called melanopsin. That cell doesn't help you see anything. Its entire job is to measure how bright the world is and report that number straight to your master clock. When bright light, outdoor light, 10 to 100 times brighter than your ceiling bulb, hits those melanopsin cells within the first hour of waking, it does two things at once. It tells your clock to shut down the leftover melatonin still lingering in your blood, and it stamps a timer on the evening's melatonin release about 14 to 16 hours later. One morning action, setting two ends of the same day, and this is the part almost nobody connects. Your ceiling light will not do it. Indoor lighting typically runs 100 to 500 lux. A dull overcast morning outside is around 1,000 to 2,000. Direct morning sun can be 50,000 or more. Your melanopsin cells are relatively insensitive on purpose. They're built to ignore the weak stuff and respond to the sky. Which means you can sit under a bright bathroom light for 20 minutes and give your master clock almost nothing. The energy of your whole day is waiting on a signal your indoor lighting is too dim to send. But this is only half the story, because I've told you about the ignition and the signal, and I haven't told you where the fuel is coming from. What is your body actually burning at 6:52 before you've eaten anything? The answer is that you woke up already fed, by yourself. Overnight, your liver has been quietly running a program called gluconeogenesis, which is exactly what it sounds like if you break the word apart. The making of new glucose. While you slept and ate nothing for 8 or 9 hours, your liver kept your blood sugar from crashing by manufacturing glucose from stored building blocks. By dawn, most of your easily accessible liver glycogen, the quick-release sugar store, is running low. So the cortisol surge in that first hour is doing something clever. It's shifting you toward burning fat for fuel while protecting the small amount of glucose you have left for the one organ that insists on it, your brain. Here's a physical model for it. Picture a house on a cold morning with 2 heat sources, a small stack of dry kindling that lights instantly, and a woodpile of dense logs that burns slow and long. Overnight, you burned most of the kindling. So at dawn, your body does something smart. It rations the last of the kindling for the room that can't use logs, which is the brain, and it starts feeding logs into every other furnace in the house. That's what the first-hour cortisol pulse orchestrates. It's not giving you energy. It's deciding which fuel burns where. So why do so many people feel foggy and heavy in that first hour, if the whole system is designed to launch them? Because the launch depends on inputs most people are actively withholding, and this is where I want to be careful and honest with you. You've probably read that cortisol is bad, that it's the stress hormone, that a spike of it in the morning is something to suppress. I've seen that claim repeated in 100 wellness articles, and it drives me up the wall, because it takes a healthy, essential rhythm and pathologizes it. A blunted cortisol awakening response, a flat, weak morning surge, is associated in the research with burnout, chronic fatigue, and depression. You don't want less morning cortisol. You want a sharp, clean spike that rises fast and falls back down by mid-morning. The problem was never the surge. The problem is a surge that never resolves. Cortisol that stays elevated all day. That's a different thing entirely. And conflating the two has made people afraid of their own ignition switch. Let me give you the harder question underneath that. If the morning surge is good and you want it sharp, what flattens it? 3 things, and you control all 3. Waking in darkness flattens it. Erratic wake times flatten it. Your master clock cannot aim a surge at a moving target. And a night of fragmented sleep flattens it, because the surge is partly a rebound off the depth of your slow-wave sleep the night before. Which means the energy of your first hour tomorrow is being decided by choices you're making tonight. Now here's a cross-field way to see the whole thing, because I think it makes it click. In electrical engineering, there's a concept called inrush current. When you flip on a large motor or a transformer, for a fraction of a second it draws a huge spike of current, far more than it uses while running. Engineers don't try to eliminate the inrush. They design for it, because that surge is the physics of overcoming inertia. Your cortisol awakening response is biological inrush current, fighting it, dampening it, sleeping through it with the curtains drawn. That's like trying to start a motor by starving it of the very current it needs to turn over. You don't get a gentle start, you get a stall. If that just reframed the way you think about mornings, and there's a layer coming about body temperature that changes when you should exercise, subscribe now, because that section is only a few minutes away, and it's the reason I put this together. So let's follow the hour minute by minute, because the sequence is where the real usefulness lives. The moment you wake, your core temperature is at its lowest point of the entire 24-hour cycle, usually somewhere around 4 to 6 a.m., depending on your rhythm. That low temperature is why you feel stiff and slow. Your muscles are literally cooler, and your nerve conduction is fractionally slower. Over the next 2 to 3 hours, your core temperature climbs by roughly half a degree, and it will keep climbing until early evening. Here's what that means for you in practical terms. The stiffness you feel at 6:52 is not a sign that something is wrong with your joints. It's a temperature reading, and it will resolve on its own, faster if you move, slower if you sit. Which raises a question worth sitting with. If your body is coldest and stiffest right after waking, does that mean morning exercise is a mistake? No, but the timing inside the morning matters more than people think. Your joints and spinal discs behave like the materials engineers call viscoelastic, part solid, part fluid. Overnight, your intervertebral discs actually absorb water and swell, which is why you're measurably taller in the morning, by about 1 to 2 centimeters, and why your spine is under more internal pressure and more prone to strain in the first hour after rising. Bend and load a cold, swollen disc at 6:55, and you're stressing it at its most vulnerable. Give it 30 to 60 minutes of gentle movement and light activity first, and you've let some of that fluid redistribute. The strong lift, the deep bend, the hard run, those belong a little later in the morning, not in the first 10 minutes. Here's the recognition beat again. If your lower back has ever felt tight and cranky first thing, then loosened up by mid-morning without you doing anything special, that's not luck. That's fluid leaving your discs under the load of simply being upright and moving. You've felt this physics your whole life. Nobody named it for you. Let me give you the protocol, because this channel doesn't just explain. It hands you something you can do tomorrow. And I want you to be able to do the first step within a minute of waking, without buying anything, because if there's a free version, I'm not going to point you at a product. Step 1, and it's the one that does the most work. Within the first 30 minutes of waking, get your eyes on outdoor light for 5 to 10 minutes. Not through a window. Window glass filters out a meaningful chunk of the wavelengths your melanopsin cells care about. Actually outside. On a bright, clear morning, 5 minutes may be plenty. On a heavy overcast day, aim for 10 to 15, because the lux is much lower. You don't stare at the sun, you just face the general brightness of the sky with your eyes open. That single action anchors your master clock, sharpens the cortisol surge you're already having, and sets your melatonin timer for tonight. One walk to the end of the driveway does more for your energy than any supplement in your cabinet. If that one step is new to you, hit like now. It's the single clearest signal that tells the algorithm to show this to someone else who's been drinking coffee in a dark kitchen, wondering why mornings feel like wading through mud. Step 2. Delay your caffeine by 60 to 90 minutes after waking. Here's the mechanism, and it's genuinely useful. While you sleep, a molecule called adenosine, the thing that makes you feel sleepy, gets cleared out. In your first hour awake, adenosine is already low, and your natural cortisol is doing the alerting for you. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors. If you drink coffee the second you wake, you're spending it on receptors that are mostly empty anyway, and you get less of a lift. Wait until your cortisol surge has crested and started falling, usually mid to late morning, and the caffeine arrives right as your natural alertness is dipping, so it actually catches you. Same coffee, better timing, a smoother day, and a softer afternoon crash. Now, I want to be straight with you about that one, because the internet has run wild with it. You may have seen the claim that delaying coffee 90 minutes prevents the afternoon crash entirely, backed by a specific cortisol curve as if it were law. The mechanism is real, and the timing principle holds. But the exactly 90 minutes everyone always version is oversold. Individual cortisol curves vary a lot, and there's no large trial nailing it to a precise number. So treat it as a direction, not a decree. Push your coffee later, notice how you feel. Adjust. That's honest. The rest is marketing. Step 3. Eat something with protein in that first hour. And here's the mechanical reason, not a slogan. Your first meal is one of the strongest secondary signals your body clock reads. Researchers call food an entraining cue, meaning it helps set the rhythm of your peripheral clocks, especially in your liver and gut. 20 to 30 grams of protein, 3 eggs, a bowl of Greek yogurt, a palm of cottage cheese, does 2 things at once. It gives your muscles the amino acids they haven't received in 9 hours, and it blunts the blood sugar spike you'd get from a purely carbohydrate breakfast. That toast and jam breakfast sends your glucose up fast and drops it hard, and that drop, around 10 a.m., is a big part of what people mistake for, "I need more coffee." A protein-anchored breakfast flattens that curve. You felt the mid-morning crash. Now you know it started at the breakfast table. Let me widen the lens, because there's a scale to this that I find genuinely striking. Every one of those cells in your liver has its own clock, and those clocks run slightly differently from the master clock in your brain. Your brain clock is set by light. Your liver and gut clocks are set largely by food, which means you can accidentally split yourself in two. Fly across 6 time zones, or work night shifts, or eat your biggest meal at 11 at night, and your brain clock and your liver clock end up on different schedules. Your brain thinks it's morning while your liver thinks it's the middle of the night. That internal disagreement has a name, circadian misalignment, and it's linked in shift worker studies to higher rates of metabolic disease. The reason your first hour matters so much is that it's the one window each day where light and food can be delivered close together and pointed at the same time, pulling your two clocks back into agreement before the day pulls them apart. Here's a physical model for that split. Picture an orchestra where the conductor is in the concert hall, but the string section is rehearsing in a room down the corridor with the door shut. Both are playing the same symphony, but without a shared beat, they drift, and what should be one piece of music becomes two overlapping performances slightly out of phase. Your morning light plus food ritual is you opening that door and letting the strings hear the conductor again. That's not a metaphor for feeling nice. That's the literal mechanism of syncing two clock systems that run on different inputs. So where does the energy of your first hour actually go, now that you can see the whole picture? A large slice goes to the cortisol awakening response, the ignition. A slice goes to your liver, switching from making glucose to releasing fat for fuel. A slice goes to raising your core temperature back up out of its overnight low. A slice goes to your master clock reading the light and resetting the day. And almost none of it, in that first hour, goes where people assume it should, into feeling instantly sharp and productive. That sharpness is the payoff of the hour, not the content of it. The first hour isn't when you perform, it's when you prime. There's a genuine uncertainty I want to leave you with, because I'd rather be honest than tidy. We know the cortisol awakening response exists in almost everyone. We know light and food and wake time consistency shape it. But how much you can improve your day by optimizing the hour, versus how much is set by your genes and your sleep the night before, that's still debated. Some chronobiologists think the morning routine is the highest leverage thing you can change. Others think it's downstream of sleep quality, and that fixing the hour without fixing the night is polishing the wrong link in the chain. My read, for what it's worth, is that they're both right. The night sets the ceiling, and the morning decides how close to that ceiling you actually get. And here's the strangest layer, the one I promised. That cortisol surge doesn't wait for your alarm. In people with regular sleep schedules, cortisol begins climbing in the last hour or so before natural waking. Your body starts the ignition sequence while you're still asleep, anticipating the moment you'll open your eyes. Your first hour of energy, in a very real sense, was being prepared for you before you were even conscious to receive it. The system knew the day was coming before you did. So tomorrow at 6:52, before you reach for the phone, before the coffee, before anything, think about what your body is already doing without you. The train is already pulling. All you have to decide is whether you help it or fight it. Tell me in the comments. What's the first thing you do in the first 10 minutes after waking, before anything else? Be honest. I want to see the real answers, not the ideal ones. And if someone you care about starts every morning exhausted in a dark kitchen, blaming their age or their coffee, share this with them, because it was never the coffee. It was the light they never let in. The energy is already there at dawn. Your only job is to stop wasting it.